In football as in life, there are those who compensate for their lack of strength and size with full and aggressive language. These types of scoundrels know well that a few well-timed words can do far more damage than a punch to the stomach. Jordi Alba is a master of the dirty art of hanging his opponents with his lethal words. A passive-aggressive player as dangerous on the field as he is from the safety of the substitutes bench, where he fully indulges in the bullying that comes so naturally to him. Paradoxically, the diminutive left-back is not only unbearably arrogant, but also a full-fledged tormentor. It's hard to find a match in which the current Inter Miami player doesn't drive an opponent mad with his trademark smoothness. Like when Jules Koundé, fed up with his taunts, threw a ball at him and the sly villain instantly played the victim to get the Frenchman sent off. But Jordi Alba's most famous incident came against another Frenchman, when Kylian Mbappé told him exactly what he would do to him if they weren't on the pitch. If there's one player in the world with a short fuse who's always ready to fight whoever stands in his way, it's Granit Xhaka, Bayer Leverkusen's midfielder and the captain of the Swiss national team. His explosive temper has taken him from losing Arsenal's captaincy after responding to insults from his own fans, following his substitution in a match against Crystal Palace, or to becoming Serbia's public enemy number one after celebrating a World Cup goal by honoring the Albanian Kosovar eagle. 4 years later, he did it again, this time with obscene gestures against the same rival. Letting his emotions get the best of him on the pitch has let Xhaka watch a red card 13 times in his career. Yet, among Xabi Alonso's many miracles, one has been taming the Swiss firebrand. And although Xhaka has finally learned to control his impulses at Bayer Leverkusen, he's still incapable of finishing a match without getting into at least one heated confrontation. Claudio Gentile, Anthony Goicoechea, Jimmy Jones, Joey Barton, Roy Keane, Zlatan Ibrahimović, Marco Materazzi, Felipe Melo, Pepe, Sergio Ramos. His name is Gianluca Mancini, and he's one of the last of an endangered species, the dirty players. Mancini is, with no doubt, a malicious centre-back, one of those who have been disappearing in modern times. With 1,000 cameras monitor every single move, and technical defenders prevail in the evolution of the game. But at Roma, there's still room for this old-school bruiser who evokes a different era. Mancini is not outstanding in aerial duels, but he makes up for it by committing fouls. He panics when pressured on the ball, but he makes it with his aggressive warrior attitude and a gift that God gave him, one he exploits to perfection: the art of irritating his opponents. Mancini isn't a reckless butcher, he's just an expert at finding the right word at the right time, or landing the perfect, persistent hit on his rival's most vulnerable spot until he completely loses his composure. As if that weren't enough, Mancini is the very definition of a sore loser. One day he shamelessly waves a flag insulting Lazio fans, and the next he brutally and senselessly attacks a young teammate while celebrating the Conference League title. In short, Mancini is simply a footballing antisocial. Theo Hernández's combative nature is evident in every Milan match. The truth is, the French left-back is also a full-fledged dirty player. He constantly resorts to dishonest tricks and streetwise tactics, designed solely to undermine his opponents. This naturally leads to Theo spending 90 exhausting minutes arguing non-stop with rival players, opposing coaches, and referees, trapped in an endless, pointless spiral of disputes. Even though he looks as innocent as he couldn't hurt a fly, we all know that Gavi is an absolute nightmare. He appeared out of nowhere without acknowledging any hierarchy, and from the very beginning it was clear that he doesn't care about size differences. Some have tried to handle him by grabbing his hair, others by shoving him as far away as possible, swapping jerseys with him long before the match ends, or, better yet, ripping it off if possible. Some will be satisfied if he wouldn't just shut up for a second, while most simply can't resist the urge to strangle him. Every few games, without fail, Gavi's neck ends up wrapped in the furious fingers of a rival player. That being said, no one hates him more than Vinicius, who can't stand the idea that there's a player even more combative than he is. Although, to be fair, the last time they faced off, Gavi was very thoughtful, making sure to keep Vinicius well informed of the scoreline during the game. If Gavi is ingracious in victory, he's even worse in defeat or a draw, as was evident in the last match against Getafe, when the irreverent youngster called his opponent terrible, but not before asking him who the hell he even was. Diego Costa's specialty was never a heading ability, nor refined technique, nor link-up play with his teammates when playing with his back to goal. No. Costa's main attributes have always been things like eye-gouging, the menacing death stare, the tight embrace with an unexpected pinch included, physical intimidation, insulting loved ones, and, above all, his sheer will and desire to fight, body to body, face to face, against the opposing center-backs. The veteran Spanish-Brazilian striker managed to flip the traditional roles, where defenders are the intimidators and forwards try to avoid provocation. With Diego Costa it was always the other way around. He was the kind of player everyone wanted as a teammate, mainly to avoid the torture of facing him as a rival. Then again, even as a teammate, Diego Costa was never exactly a guarantee of peace and harmony. People like him always need to exchange a few words with the first person who crosses their paths. Arturo Vidal is, in his own way, another top-tier taunter. During the semifinals of the 2019 Copa America, for example, he openly expressed his joy at facing Peru instead of Uruguay. I think it won't be as tough as if we had faced Uruguay. That would have been harder because of the way they play. Peru is also a good team, but they don't press as much. Chile, the reigning two-time champion, went on to lose that semifinal 3-0. But hey, mistakes are meant to be learned from. Something King Arturo demonstrated when celebrating Flamengo's Copa Libertadores win. We're going to kick their asses! Well, that's a little bit unfortunate because that match never took place. All of that because his team was eliminated in the semifinals. Before that, Vidal had already stirred things up ahead of a Champions League quarterfinal in the only way he knows how. They have a lot of confidence, but tomorrow they're not playing against Bundesliga teams. They're playing against Barcelona, the best team in the world. We all know how that finished, and of course, the Chilean couldn't keep quiet before the second leg of River Plate vs Colo-Colo in the 2024 Copa Libertadores. Sure, we could compare prices now, my price versus theirs, but if we compare titles, I have more than all of River's players combined. In short, Arturo Vidal may jinx himself, but that doesn't make him any less of a braggart. Some believe that the sports stars should set an example. Emiliano Martinez certainly does. He's an example of perseverance, dedication, personality, and a winning mentality. He's an example of how to command the penalty area, how to save penalties, and how to narrow shooting angles in one-on-one situations to avoid losing a World Cup final. Having acknowledged all of that, Emi Martínez is certainly not a role model for children. The Argentine goalkeeper first made a name for himself at the 2021 Copa America with his signature primitive behavior. Back then, many of us assumed it was just the reaction of a poor devil experiencing victory for the first time. Someone who still didn't know how to handle himself. But years have passed and no matter how much he wins, Dibu still hasn't learned. Could it be true that class can be bought? Not knowing how to win is only half of the problem. Dibu Martínez also doesn't know how to lose, as he made abundantly clear after Argentina's most recent defeat to Colombia. But one thing he does know very well is how to get inside of his opponent's head. The Aston Villa goalkeeper doesn't step on the pitch to make friends. He wants to win, and he doesn't bother to hide it. When we talk about controversial or insulting players, there are several types. Some specialize in taunting the fans, others focus on pestering the poor referee. Most aim their provocations at their opponents. And then there's Vinicius, who does all of the above. First, let's talk about Mario Balotelli, a footballer who doesn't really have any problems with anyone, except his own coaches. Coaching the Italian is a nightmare. His laziness, indiscipline, and insubordination have driven his managers to the brink, sometimes even to the point of physically attacking him in plain sight, and not just once, but multiple times, like in a Manchester City training session with Roberto Mancini, and years later during a Turkish league match with his then manager, Vincenzo Montella. Vinicius has a problem. He thinks the whole world is conspiring against him. The Brazilian doesn't understand that Real Madrid players, especially those considered the team's best, have always been the main targets of fan insults and rough treatment from opponents. Whether acceptable or not, it all has one purpose: to stop the biggest threat of the most powerful team. It's not as personal as it seems, but Vinicius takes it that way. Sometimes he has a point, because racism has no justification, but most of the time he doesn't. The Madrid forward reacts angrily to every fall, as if being tackled wasn't part of the game. Vinicius can be exasperatingly cocky. Worse still, it's not just the fans or rivals that he torments, it's the referees. Every decision is met with complaints, insults, sarcastic claps, and, above all, mocking laughter from a bad-mannered, out-of-control footballer who, if he continues like this, he will be remembered more for his tantrums than for his brilliant footballing ability. That's the fate that already awaits Luis Suárez, one of the greatest strikers of all time, yet his goals will be forgotten in a couple of generations. But the legend of the wild Uruguayan forward who beat not one, not two, but three opponents, that will endure. The same Luis Suárez who was suspended for racial slurs. The same one who committed one of the most controversial handballs in football history. That will be his legacy. One of the most controversial players of all time. Although he's retired now, Zlatan Ibrahimović deserves a special mention as a born taunter. His career was long and filled with dirty tackles, whether against his own teammate Rafael van der Vaart in an international match or his nemesis Marco Materazzi, with whom he took the eye for an eye, tooth for a tooth philosophy to the extreme. The bigger and stronger his enemy was, the better for Ibra. From Pep Guardiola to his former Manchester United teammate Romelu Lukaku, whom Zlatan mocked for believing in voodoo. No one was spared from his sharp tongue. Not even Cristiano Ronaldo. The only thing left for Zlatan was to proclaim himself the god of all heavens. Oh wait, he did that too. More than just a football manager, Jose Mourinho is a master manipulator who dedicates every day of his life to destabilizing others. His strategy never changes, no matter where he goes. Brag about past successes, blame referees for defeats, provoke a rival coach to distract them from their job, claim there is a Masonic conspiracy against him, accuse the media of being part of said conspiracy, find a scapegoat, whether a player, a doctor, or anyone else, to shift attention away from his team's real problems. And, of course, pick fights with everyone, because Mourinho needs villains, antagonists, and windmills to tilt at. Otherwise, his life will have no meaning. If you like this video, remember that you can give a comment and a like and maybe a subscription. That will help us a lot to keep making content. Don't be like these guys. Or I don't know, maybe you like rough play.